Welcome everyone, my name is Rita Lenkei. I'm a predoc at the Department of Ethology at Laureate University. They say that it's recommended to begin your talk with a question to take the attention of the audience. Luckily, I have one in my title, and hopefully at the end of my presentation you will know not just the answer, but also why this question is an important one. And the question is, do dogs recognize their body as an obstacle? So my research area is the so-called self-representation. What are traits or actions where the self is somehow part of the mental model? However, when considering these traits in non-human animals, researchers typically try to find evidence to higher order capacities, leading to an arbitrary skewed view. A typical example is the so-called mirror mark test. In a nutshell, here the subjects are exposed to a mirror and they test whether they can recognize themselves in it or no. This experiment had a pivotal role in the investigation of the animal self, and many species were tested, including primates and monkeys, Asian elephants, corvids, giant pandas, and even a fish species. However, the problem with it is that it has no real ecological relevance for many species. Firstly, there are species where visual recognition is not an important module at all, while in some species eye contact is an agonistic signal. And we all know that if you look into a mirror, our reflection will inevitably look back. So in these species, they have no chance to learn how the mirror works. Meanwhile, based on this paradigm, self-awareness was considered as a yes or no or binary trait. Thus, if a species fails it may lead scientists to consider their self-representation as either non-existing or incomparably weaker than in case of humans. Besides the approach that considers self-awareness as an undividable cognitive trait, there are theoretical frameworks arguing that the development of these abilities might be described as a continuum. However, it is still debatable, as these abilities, just like any other trait, most likely developed under various forces of selection. A very good example is that a singing bird needs to process its own voice when it learns a new song, while a monkey needs to consider its own body weight when jumping around the canopy. So different selective forces leads to different development of different traits. Based on these, we propose a modular framework to study self-representation, focusing on the ecological needs of the given species. We argue that these abilities are more or less connected cognitive skills, and they are both important to deal with the physical and also with the social environment. The modular concept of self-representation allows scientists to track the evolution of these cognitive capacities with a parallel reasoning based on forces of selection according to the ecology of a given species. Based on this bottom-up approach, we started to study body awareness. Holding information about one's own body is not only important in case of moving in the physical environment, but it is also needed during social interactions such as agonistic, competitive or cooperative encounters. Thus, it might be one of the most fundamental building blocks of self-representation. We define it as the ability to hold information about one's own body in mind as an explicit object in relation to other objects in the world. In this study, we investigated the body awareness in a species that has not yet been found as capable of the hallmark criterion of higher order self-representation. Although both from cognitive reasons, they have a well-proven capacity for complex cognition, and for ecological reasons, they are large-bodied, fast-moving terrestrial predators or scavengers. It is a very likely candidate for possessing the capacity of body awareness. Just like in some other mammals, in dogs it is known that the assessment of the body size is very important during agonistic interactions. Moreover, in dogs this is a particularly interesting question because no other species has such a variable physical appearance, which is the result of the artificial selection, of course. What we used is the so-called body as an obstacle paradigm, and it is taken from the human literature where toddlers were requested to hand over a blanket they were sitting on. A subject was considered as being able to understand the connection between the initial unsuccessfulness and the body as an obstacle if he or she got off from the blanket before passing it to the experimenter. Infants younger than 18-24 months did not move off from the blanket and eventually gave up trying to finish the task. By our knowledge, this task was modified to test non-human animals only once, to test Asian elephants. In case of the elephants, a stick was attached to the carpet and the experimenter has to hand it over. But here the task is the same as in case of humans. The subjects need to understand that they have to leave the mat to pass the attached stick. By adapting the method used to test the elephants, we tested whether dogs would respond by getting off from a mat if they noticed that they could not lift a toy that was attached to it because their own body impedes this action. With additional testing conditions, we controlled for other mechanisms, resulting in potential similar behavior responses. We tested 54 more than 1-year-old companion dogs who were able to pass an object to the owner. In the main test condition, the object that the dogs had to pick up was attached to the mat where the dogs were standing on. In the unattached condition, we tested whether the subjects are indeed able to pass an unfamiliar object to the owner. With the help of the foot discomfort condition, where the experimenter jerked the mat under the dog's feet with a rope, we plan to explore the possibility that the subject left the mat in the test condition only because they were frightened by the movement caused by the lifting the toy together with the mat. In the main control, the attached to the ground condition, the object was fixed to the ground and to the mat. Here we hypothesized that if dogs indeed understand the connection between the obstructed removal of the object and their body as an obstacle in the test condition, they would leave the mat sooner and more frequently than in case of the other control conditions. Our test was designed to be as short as possible, thus we repeated the first two conditions only once because we expected that dogs will rarely leave the mat, while the test and the attached conditions lasted maximum 30 seconds and consisted of 4 repetitions each, which we performed in a randomized order across the subjects. Before the results, let's watch a short video about the test itself. As we expected, only a few dogs left the mat in the unattached and foot discomfort conditions, while some more dogs left it in the attached to the ground condition, but still significantly less than in case of the test condition. The crucially important attached to the ground condition helps to differentiate between two competing explanations behind the response of the dog's behavior, which were "there is an obstacle" or "my body is an obstacle." When comparing the frequencies of leaving the mat in these conditions, we found that dogs came off the mat significantly more often in the test condition, even in their first trial, meaning that it was also significant when we analyzed together the 4-4 trials, of course. And they left the mat more often while still holding the toy in case of the test condition. This suggests that in case of the test condition, leaving the mat was part of their problem-solving behavior, while in the attached to the ground condition, they rather left the mat because they just got bored and gave it up. Taking a closer look, they left the mat not just more frequently, but also sooner in the test condition. Still, one could argue that as the object is in the attached to the ground condition had a limited range of movement, this may have caused dogs to leave the mat less frequently in this particular case. To exclude this explanation, we analyze separately the latency of stepping off with the hind feet only, as this movement was not affected by the method of securing the object. As we found that dogs left the mat sooner with their hind feet in the test than in the attached to the ground condition, this provided proof that they indeed started to move off earlier from the mat when it was truly needed for solving the problem. So based on our results, we can conclude that dogs can recognize their body's spatial and causal relation to the environment. And here comes the particularly interesting part, that in toddlers, the onset of succeeding in the body as an obstacles task is in parallel with the success in the mirror mark test. It was found that elephants passed the mirror mark test, however, dogs failed it. It means that our results are the first indication that recognizing the body as an obstacle may exist independently from being capable of visual self-recognition. It nicely supports that self-representation is an array of more or less connected cognitive skills, and the presence or lack of a particular skill or building block may vary according to the species. As a take-home message, 3 main points emerge. First, we need to establish the ecological and evolutionary background of a given species before applying empirical experiments. Second, these should be hypothesis-driven, and third, they need to be as varied as possible to determine the different aspects of a species' self-representation. I am thankful for my supervisor and for my colleagues, they are the best. Here you can see the mentioned references, credits, and thank you for watching.